Greetings all. Welcome to our live stream number 6, and this is all tied to Circular Cities Week initiative from the Circular Economy Club. My name is Mike Poyle, in case you don't know me, and I am very, very pleased to take a completely different approach today and really focusing on some of my neighbors. I live here in Vienna, as you might have seen from the background, and I am very, very blessed to have 4 participants coming from the Visegrád Group. And for those of you who are not familiar with this concept, it's a joint initiative from Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, and Poland. And we have representatives from all 4. So without further ado, let me go ahead and move to our panelists. So we'll be starting off with Agnieszka, coming from Innowo in Poland, and then we'll continue with Vojtech, who will be representing primarily the city of Prague, although he does much more than just represent the city of Prague. Then continuing with Ivana, closest neighbor to me in Bratislava, 70 kilometers from Vienna. And then lastly, we'll follow up with Bence, who will be talking about the activities to be found within the city of Budapest. So I would say, without further ado, let's go ahead and move on to Agnieszka. Thank you very much for joining, Agnieszka. Greetings to Poland. I know that you're doing all kinds of different activities in Poland, and I think it would be quite interesting, perhaps if you can briefly describe to us, what do you think is unique about circularity in Poland?
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me here. So yes, we are a think tank, NGO, and we try to support all kind of activities which could help support transformation into circular future. And this is pretty new concept, I think. And in Poland, we still a little bit maybe too much focus on waste, not on the resources, because like circular economy for me is the managing of the resources, and that's what we should put the biggest burden. Unfortunately, Poland is a little bit different approach. We're still trying to deal with the waste. And that's why we want to try to change the perspective of the people. We do, for example, a project with 3 Polish cities. It's a Kraków, Gdańsk, Lublin, when we try to investigate, first of all, resources flow analysis, what kind of materials get into the city and what kind of like get out, and how we can close the loop in between, let's say. And of course, we will do it with the all kind of group of stakeholders, because we try to work with the people, for the people, with different, as I said, stakeholders, so decision maker, local administration, but also citizens, because I think circular economy is also about cooperation and collaboration, and it's great because in normal like world like we're living today, when capitalism is a rule, we more on the compete mode, let's say, and this is what is great in circular economy is this cooperation approach and building actually local communities in the cities, and this is what we're trying to do in Innowo. Also, we try to like convince small medium enterprises who are kind of the base for the economy to convince them how they can transform the business model into more sustainable. How do they transform the product into eco-friendly?
Okay. And yeah, unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties tied to your vocals. And now I hear an echo coming from my end as well. So in any case, I think it would be good, perhaps Agnieszka, if you can stick around a little bit and maybe we could elaborate a little bit more into some of those things that you're working on, because I think it's quite fascinating, especially looking at the 3 cities, going ahead and performing the comparison and really understanding the inputs, the process, and the outputs. I think that would be a great learning experience for all of our participants here in our live stream. And in fact, I'd like to go ahead and mention to everybody who's participating, you have a chance to go ahead and actually add to the content. We have a chat box. We are broadcasting on LinkedIn Live, YouTube, and on Facebook. So please feel free, feel empowered to go ahead and use the chat box, because we'd be really keen on your commentary that you might be able to go ahead and bring to the mix. So again, Agnieszka, thank you very much for joining. If I can just go ahead and send you back to the back room, and then once we are finished with the initial interviews, if you can participate in the panel discussion, I think it'd be fantastic. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to Vojtech. Greetings, Vojtech. Thank you very much for joining today. And of course, in comparison to the situation what Agnieszka was talking about in Poland, how do you see the situation within the Czech Republic?
I think what's interesting about this event, and it's great to be here, first of all,
Thank you.
is that I think the situation in Czech, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia could be described similar regarding our transition towards the circular economy. It has changed tremendously over the last 5 years that I'm busy with the topic in the Czech Republic, from explaining why should stakeholders be interested. That was 5 years ago, to today, when all these big players like cities, companies, the state are really on it and are trying to do their best to be part of that transition. So that's what's happening right now as we speak. I think circular economy has stopped becoming this kind of broad concept that no one really knows what it could mean to them, what it could bring. And it has evolved into something really cool, sexy, and something that we really need. Because without circular economy, we will not reach the carbon neutrality, another huge topic, extremely relevant for the whole world, for the Europe, and for our V4 region as well, of course.
And I know a little bit about your history, Vojtech, and I know that you actually studied the subject in Holland, which of course for us within the circular economy realm is almost seemed to be the holy grail of where most of the great ideas have come through. I'm just curious from that of what you were able to go ahead and actually experience with from Holland, how difficult was it to take those concepts and actually apply them locally?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we need to give credits to the Netherlands, although there are many countries doing tremendous job. Although Netherlands, in my eyes, also has really been the one country that has kickstarted the real take on the circular economy. And I'm glad to have been there studying at Wageningen, specifically the topic of urban environmental management. So that's something that I'm dealing with in Prague right now. But when I was there 6-7 years ago, I met with other couple of great people, Czechs, now alumni of Wageningen, and we thought that circular economy, back then really trending in the Netherlands, no one has heard about it in Czech at all by then. So that was our mission, to bring it to Czech and perhaps even to the broader region around, and start disseminating the results, the good cases of practice that we saw were happening around. And I think we have managed, and I think that's what's really great about Europe and about this know-how, technological, cultural exchanges, because there's so much that we can learn from each other and so much happening out there. And so many things have been already done, invented, tested, and proved to be working, that many of the things that we're dealing with in Czech and in Prague are replicable. And for our case, we can replicate what's happening in the Netherlands, Sweden, but perhaps also in Poland or Slovakia. But I also hope that our work that we're doing in Prague is replicable to other cities around the world. And that's also the reason why I was interested in organizing this event as well in the first place.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting to find out from those elements that you referred to, those things that are replicable. Do you have maybe an example that you might be able to share with us, where something that you thought was replicable and you found out that you had to make alterations to fit the local circumstance?
Yeah, so the ideas about the circular economy, the key principles, are replicable by their definition, right? And when you're working with a city, when you're working in a company, in a state, you need to design solutions which are systematic, have high impact, and at the first place, eliminate waste, and the second, use waste as a resource, and in the third, regenerate local ecosystems. And you can keep these principles in mind in whatever you're doing. If you're running an NGO, if you have a restaurant, if you are at the board of a company, or if you are helping others to do that, in our case, in the city. And then, of course, within these principles, there are many of great cases of practice within several key sectors, which I also think are replicable for other cities. So we know that cities can have a huge impact, positive impact on our lives and on circular economy and climate change adaptation and mitigation in key sectors such as food and agriculture, built environment, construction and demolition, and also waste and water flows, which are currently really linear, and cities can have a really nice role in kind of circulating these key material flows within these sectors and nudging the local stakeholders, the citizens, to a more sustainable life. So that is replicable, but the challenge, of course, is to adjust these cases of practice to the local circumstances, which are a lot about culture. We shouldn't underestimate that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that what's working in Netherlands or in Sweden is replicable in Czech, right? And vice versa. But so you always have to adjust a little bit, but there are some I think general cases that are really working, and some of them could be, for example, closing the biomass flows, right? So we know that there is a huge potential economic, environmental, and also social one in preventing food waste and what's wasted, because it will always be something wasted, right, from our food, unfortunately. Then we need to collect it 100% at source and turn it into raw materials again. And that's what, for example, one of the projects that I hope to be talking about later on that we're dealing with in Prague. So our aim is to close this biomass flow, prevent food waste, and what's wasted, turn it into biogas and local fertilizer, which is organic, that we can apply on our agricultural land to, again, coming back to these principles of circular economy, regenerate the local ecosystems. And this particular case of closing the biomass flows, I think that's something that's really common in the Nordics, in the Western Europe, and I think it's something, and in Vienna as well, but it's something that any city can do, and there's so much to be gained. So there's nothing to really think so hard about. Let's just do it.
Yeah, if it was only that easy, I think the real challenge we have is moving from these technical cycles to the biological cycles, which obviously help us expedite that, exactly what you were talking about, Vojtech. In any case, thank you very much for joining us. If you could stick around as well, because we will have, I'll bring everybody back for our panel discussion. So first of all, again, thank you very much for your contribution, Vojtech. And if you can just bear with us a little bit, we will bring you back very, very soon. Thank you for that. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and move on to Ivana. Greetings, Ivana.
Hello.
One of my closest neighbors, 70 kilometers away from Vienna. And I'm assuming that you're actually in Bratislava today?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Here's a great example. We are neighbors. But we know that we live in environments that geographically are very close, but culturally different, economically different, and perhaps even from a circularity mindset different. I would be very curious, because this would be a learning experience from you to me. How do you see those differences between the two cities?
Well, we take Vienna as an inspiration. I must admit that, yeah. And we have a lot of things that we started together to work on, because last year, one of our activities that we did, and Vojtech was also part of it for Prague, was one conference. It was called What City? And it was an introduction of circular economy in municipalities, but in big cities. So we had Prague, we had Vienna, we had Amsterdam, and we made like one day full of workshops and presentation for the cities of Slovakia, because circular economy is more familiar in Slovakia for recycling, maybe, or more connected to these kind of topics, or as Agnieszka already mentioned, it's more connected to the waste than the sources. So this is something that we want to change. And as Vojtech mentioned, that 5 years ago, the circular economy wasn't a topic. It was like something that we brought from abroad and started to talk about with our stakeholders, and everyone was thinking that it's a really nice idea, but we didn't see like how can we implement circular economy. But today we can say that we made a lot of decisions that brought us more close to the circular economy, especially in the field of bio-waste, for example, that from the 1st of January, every city is obliged to collect kitchen waste in Slovakia, except Bratislava, because we have incineration plants, so we need more time to adopt, and we will have to do that in 2023. So, as I already mentioned, that we made huge steps in legislation and with moving the cities and companies towards circular economy, but from the point of view from the waste. And as I already mentioned, this What City conference, one part of it was that we made like excursions of public to the places where waste is turned into a source, or where it's like these places we call away, like where is disappearing, and the public was very interested in it. So the topic is becoming very popular. And one inspiration from the city of Vienna that we implemented this year was the reuse center, because Vienna has an amazing concept of reuse center. And we also visited it, and we were presented by the manager for this project, and he was very helpful in setting up our reuse center that we launched in like a month ago, and was very successful. But due to Corona, we are not just capable of running it, so we are just working on another concept, like how can we also in these kind of times of pandemic do this kind of projects. So yeah, as I mentioned, Vienna is very inspirational to us, and we are doing a lot of activities in the cities and with private companies. We did a lot of education in first 2 years in schools or in public for this topic to become more, so the public can be more aware of this topic. And now we have this feeling that that a lot of people know about it. And there are more and more people like wanting to do something with this topic, because they really like it, and they understand the principles, and they understand that it's pretty practical, that it's not just some idea that you are following, but it's really bringing the solutions and bringing the results.
I just want to go ahead and clarify something to everyone who's watching this live stream. Ivana was not paid by the city of Vienna to give us such accolades. That came truly from the heart. And so I just want to go ahead and make sure that was clarified. Maybe in closing question, perhaps if you can talk about, you mentioned the question of pandemic, of course, which was a problem for all of us. Maybe looking into your crystal ball, and if I can give you one wish, just one wish for 2021, concentrating on circularity, what would it be?
Well, that's a really hard question.
I know it is, but I wanted to save the best question for the end.
Yeah, well, if I have like one, I just want people to learn from this situation of pandemic, and just to evaluate everything that this situation brought to us, and help us just to make better decisions in running of our countries, and in making decisions in everyday life. So I guess this would be the answer.
Oh, in fact, what I love about your wish is that something that we can all profit from. So for that, I'm actually very thankful. Ivana, if I can have you go ahead and stick around with us for a little bit longer, I'll send you back to to our VIP lounge, and then once and please feel free and join the others. And I think we have some Prosecco cooled up in the back, so please feel free to help yourself. Yeah, okay, there. And then we'll look forward to bringing you back to the stage in a few minutes' time. Thanks a lot for that. All right, and we have, and I've already promised Bence that I would go ahead and make him the capo. So Bence, thank you very much for joining us from the city of Budapest. And I'm going to start picking your brain and understanding. So what do you think is unique in what's going on in Budapest, or do you feel there's anything unique going on in Budapest tied to circularity that you'd like to go ahead and highlight to start us off?
First of all, I have to say the Prosecco's fables in the VIP lunch.
That's great. Yeah, I did my best.
It's
I went
a great
out.
organization.
Well, I had to go out before the lockdown started on Tuesday to go ahead and organize all that. So I'm very glad that you were able to go ahead and partake with us, Benz. Thank you for that.
Okay. So to hearing the others, I have to say we may, as Budapest and Hungary, may lag behind a little bit, a few years. So we are rather in the planning phase or the starting phase to be able to understand this, to see the historical background. You know, it was always rather a marginal story in the past years here in Budapest. The prior city management rather focused, you know, in huge investments and I don't know, building a bridge or new buses and so on. So the focus was put away from this circular economy and green and these type of issues. And as you may know, the new local government started its work in end of 2019, where it's really an important topic. And of course, pandemic came in, which didn't help this topic. But I have to say, we had a lot of initiatives. What I would like to highlight, I'm an economist and not an ecologist. So rather from an organizational part, what we started as a start, that we set up an organization. And I think it's a really important work. So for example, there are new departments working on climate projects. There is a new department for green issues. We do have a chief of landscape architect who is really Facebook heavy and you know, raising awareness of the people. So first of all, this organizational part is really important to be able to do new things in this topic. The second, what we started, this planning phase, actually, to have a clear picture what is going on, to who are the relevant companies, NGOs, and all these kind of relevant participants. And what I did started and Budapest started, you know, it was rather a silo approach. So we had many great ideas, and we had many companies who started to work on that on past years as well, but we had to contact. So I would say the biggest issue or obstacle is not to find a good idea. There are many. You just have to go to Holland or Vienna or even to Prague and Poland and Bratislava.
And you were not paid for that advertisement for Vienna either. I just want to go ahead and make sure that
only the Prosecco. But the great obstacle or the challenge, I would say, to implement these things. And so rather, what the issue is that this project management capabilities are the bottleneck here in Budapest, and it's not easy to move forward with this project. So you have to connect the participants, you have to provide knowledge sharing, you have to convince politicians, you have to help the ecologists actually to be, and the specialists in this area, to think as decision makers, and what these decision makers love. So numbers, actually, and short presentations, and okay, these are the 3 things you have to do in the next 1 year. So what we are working on, we are doing feasible studies, we are doing cost-benefit analysis, present decision-making materials. So you have to raise awareness, not only the, I don't know, individuals, but also the decision makers.
That takes me in a certain direction, especially going back to what you said about the silos. And I think obviously this is one of the problems. What I think is really beautiful about what we're trying to put together here today, we keep thinking about these borders that we created as people, that of course nature doesn't pay any attention to these borders. And it's important that we work in consort with each other. Otherwise, we might solve a problem for ourselves, but basically we're pushing it across the border. We know a little bit about that, especially since 2015. But the real question here is how do we go ahead and break down these silos and create some sort of co-creation, if I may put it that way. And then lastly, and I know there's a mouthful for you, Ben, so apologies for that. Is there a way that we can get people to actually feel empowered, that they actually are taking on this problem, that they feel that they own the problem, with the intention of actually trying to create a groundswell? I don't think it's an easy task, but I'd be curious to get your opinion on this.
Regarding the silos, I do believe that you have to talk and talk and talk. So to let them speak each other and talk to each other, this is the most important thing. So obviously, I had many examples, and one of my company I'm responsible for, it's a waste management company, tried to do a new initiative, some composting some things, and I just asked, I don't know, but whether the water waste managing company already tried it. Oh, we don't know. I think just maybe we should call them. And yes, they tried already, and they had many pros and cons and good ideas, and that this will work, this won't work, and only just a phone call. So maybe it seems really hard, but many times it's not rocket science. So organizing these kind of events can heal the borders. Actually, I would say.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And the whole idea is to go ahead and share the experience. And more often than not, that we can learn much more from each other than we realize. And I think following that, I'd like to go ahead and bring everybody else back from the VIP room. And so we have everybody together. There's been a number of questions or comments to be found within the chat box. So I thought, I'm watching this from the side of my eye, notice that the chat box is moving. So perhaps if we can go ahead and take some of the questions coming from the chat box, and I'll leave it up to you how you would like to go ahead and address it. We'll start with Fitra, who stated, how do you engage or advocate the local government in the city to provide policies to support the circular economy? So this is really public policy 101. Anybody care to go ahead and take a stab at that question?
I will raise my hand.
Thank you.
Actually, this is what I do. As I mentioned, I'm an economist and rather working as a project manager on different types of projects and not only a circular economy. And what I do see, there are many good ideas. But most of the times you have to think as a decision maker. So what does he need? He doesn't need, or he or she doesn't need, I don't know, 100 pages of feasible studies. They need only 10 pages. What are the benefits for me as a politician? What are the benefits for the city? What are the benefits for the country? What do I have to do? How much money do I need? What is the return of this investment? So really work with these type of decision maker mind. This is really important. And of course, to be able to get the support from other types, you have to go around and speak this material with not almost everybody, but with the important stakeholders. So this is how you manage these things, I think.
Great. Any other feedback? Ivana, please.
Yes, we have a lot of support from the legislation in Slovakia that we are obliged to make a lot of changes in the municipalities in next years. So this is really helping us that we were very active in changing the law or the Waste Act from the beginning. And we were a part of different working groups in the Ministry of Environment or Ministry of Economy. Sometimes Ministry of Finance was also joining us for these meetings. And it's then really helping a lot when you have to advocate in the local government. Why do you have to these changes? Of course, it's pretty painful that you are doing it because of the change of the law, because it sounds like you have to, that you don't have choice. But then in these cities, there are people that are very passionate about this topic, about the topic of climate change or carbon neutrality. So we always have some kind of advocates that are advocating for these topics, and their role is really important. But as my colleague from Budapest mentioned, it's not really a good idea to do it with like a lot of pages of some studies or whatever. It has to be very simple, just to explain the ideas and to show the practical view, and then to calculate like what kind of impact it will have on the city or on the region. And these are the arguments that you can use, but there are a lot of levels of it.
Vojtech, I saw you raise your hand.
What was said from Budapest and Bratislava I just want to maybe add one thing, and maybe it's like a little ball that I'm throwing later to Agnieszka as well, because I think besides these things, which, like I said, I totally agree, we need to co-create. We need to start with some real action, one project that brings together the local stakeholders and the local decision makers, maybe not from the very top, because they don't have time to be part of workshops and conferences, and right. But you need to engage not just the very, very top, but the people that they listen to and then they're surrounded with, and you need to bring them to some projects, maybe one or two that can where they can participate, where they can be heard, where you listen to their priorities and you tap into that, and you come up with one or two small but impactful things that start rolling. And once you have that ball rolling, it's so much easier to build on that momentum, especially if the local decision makers see that it's working, it has a good feedback from the local citizens and so on. So projects as well. That's my comment.
Agnieszka, your turn.
Yes. Yeah. If I may add, I think that business, it could be a convincing tool, because there's an ecosystem, and a business is important part for city development. And circular economy give a competitive advantage for the businesses. And that's why to show like local administration that, to change the policy, they can also help the SMEs and enterprises to really develop and expand. And that could be, I think, the one of the argumentation. Although in Poland, I see the bigger interest in local administration than in the national government, which, of course, on the one hand, it makes me happy because it's make us easy to cooperate with them. But still, I think we need more interest from the national level as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think that is quite interesting. You talk about the national versus the local, and of course, that's something that's not unique for Poland. We have this issue in Austria as well, and I tend to think that that's quite universal. How do you, as being the conduits of change for circularity, how do you actually go ahead and deal with the local, which might take another political affiliation perhaps, or certainly looking at it from a different perspective? How do you actually go ahead and not play them off, but how do you go ahead and manage the interests of both parties? Leave it to Agnieszka, please. Yeah.
How we can play it? No, that's the issue, because it's like the silos, yeah. Sometimes, and even like two ministries. I'm not covering Poland. There is one Ministry of Economic Development and second Ministry of Climate, and they both actually supposed to be responsible for circular economy, and they not really closely cooperate. That's a problem. So it's even worse with the local administration, when sometimes even the parties, the politician party, are different, yes, because that's also an issue, because in government you have a completely different political perspective than in the local administration, which makes all things even more complicated. So that's an issue, but I think we should be above that, and the politicians should also understand that it's like the common goal and common future. So that's a good question, which I don't have one good answer, I think, at the moment.
Vojtech, please.
Yeah, I would love to follow up on that, because I think that from my experience working with Prague, it's been more than a year right now, is that we don't need to wait for the national government to finally wake up, recognize this crisis, because they're not doing it. Cities, they have an amazing role in the transition towards the circular, because they are largely independent, right? They have huge budgets in terms of the capitals. They can influence daily lives of, in case of Prague, 1/8 of the whole population. I think Hungary is going to be even more on a daily basis. And we don't need to wait for the national governments to tell us what to do, because they're not. And we can take a radically different and faster approach and show the whole nation what needs to be done and what can be done. And that's exactly what's happening in Prague and in the Czech Republic. And I'm really happy for that. So that's maybe what I wanted to say. Cities do not need to follow the national line. That's exactly what happened in the US after 2016 elections, right? Donald Trump said, we're stepping out of the Paris Agreement. And the cities said, well, we're not, right? We're going to double down on that. And we're going to show you that we can do that differently. And we'll still have a different direction, and that's what the cities can do. And they, in that sense, they have a huge power and leverage.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're going to see it again in the United States. Ben, so you would have something to add?
Yeah, I totally agree with Vojtech. Actually, here in Budapest, we have a saying that show an example to the districts in Budapest, and also show an example to other cities. So we don't have a too big budget, actually, but still, it's the biggest in Hungary. We have the biggest team in the city, on the municipality. So we have to be the leaders in many ways. I do agree. And back to the other question, it was about I so called them quick wins. I totally agree with Vojtech. So don't start with huge investments taking 3 years, but rather show a few small working example, and people will be engaged. People and politicians and other cities will be engaged as well.
Okay, sounds great. Ivana, please. You're on mute, hon. Nope. You're on mute. There, very good.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to add that sometimes it's also easier to start with the smaller cities, that you don't have to wait for the big cities to be like an example, because that's how we actually started, with very small municipalities, and we were writing a lot of articles and a lot of appearance in the media to give these examples, that some things that really can work. So this was a big inspiration then for the ministry to change the law towards a more circular way. So this is also very helpful. So sometimes in the beginning it was really hard to engage big cities. The smaller cities or municipalities were more open to, or some regions were more open to the cooperations. So any kind of good examples from your country or some similar country. For example, we were cooperating a lot with the Czech Republic also. So that is something that is culturally familiar within your country, because if you give an example in Slovakia from Netherlands, or I don't know, from Vienna, whether it's close, but the mentality of people is different. They say yeah, well, that's possible in the Netherlands or in Austria, but not in Slovakia. No, the things here are different. But so it's really good to build these local examples of circular solutions, very small, very simple.
That's funny, because usually that's the excuse that we use here in Vienna. Oh, that applies in the UK or in USA, but certainly not in Austria. Great. Perhaps if I can move on to some of the other questions that we have here. There's one coming that I thought would be interesting to allude to. I am currently studying sustainable management in India, and I'm interested in learning about how we can implement circular economy in India. So is there any way from our knowledge here of how we can actually go ahead and transfer our knowledge into different regions? Any thoughts on that?
Well, it depends on what they want to start with, because there are a lot of possibilities. How can you start? You can start with the cities, as we spoke a few minutes ago, or you can start with big companies that have a big influence in your country, which is rather huge, and you have a big impact. Or you can start with a small region that will be like circular economy lab, that you will try all these projects, and then you can give these examples to the other regions. So it's really good to start with raising awareness about this topic in the media and in the government and in the local government, and on different levels. You have to talk about this topic a lot, and you have to talk in the examples, like what did other countries did, or what did other cities did, or some companies, and try to find some pilot projects in the cities or in some companies that you can show that it's possible implement the circular economy. That would be my advice.
Mhm. Great. Any other thoughts from our panelists? Agnieszka, please.
First of all, it's good maybe to gather all passionate people about it, and start to build kind of society, like ecosystem, a group of the different completely perspective, different stakeholders from different from different niche. And then try to work together on the topic. I think that's a good start. And also, like referring what Vojtech said, that I'm fully agree that the start of the circular economy is good in the city, and city will be the trigger, and they are a trigger for the transformation, that's for sure. But for example, national governments we need for the scaling up, to help the scaling up the innovation and solutions, because still we have little pilotage project. We still don't have like the big, pan-European project and many kind of stakeholder cooperate. This is lack in the circular economy, at least what I know. And national governments or European Union could help to really make the businesses, like sustainable business, more competitive with these global players. Yes, and that's why we need the regulation, the legislation, to change also the ratio between raw resources, secondary resources, and the labor. Because now the labor is the most expensive, and that's why we not repair things, because it's too expensive for them. So that's from my side.
Vojtech, please.
Yeah, I will take it down to my own experience with now Prague, and I think, and that goes maybe to all the other cities as well, is that you need to start measuring it, right? If you can't measure it, you cannot control it. If you don't know what you're dealing with, what your material flows are, and so on, you cannot implement the circular economy properly. It will always be about a gut feeling, which is not 100% accurate. So I would say, yeah, and I totally agree with what was said, like team up, do something, right? Start somewhere small, but also maybe big. Whatever you can do, or the people that can do as well, like to be part of that change. But going down to the cities in the V4 and to Prague, I think for us, what was really big help to start with a circular economy was a project called Circular Scan Prague, which was important because we measured in our key sectors the material flows, and we identified the real opportunities, the systematic changes that we need, and we developed strategies and then proposed key pilots that we're now implementing as well. But it would be harder to implement if we didn't know what we're dealing with. So measure.
Okay. Bence, you wanted to add something to the mix, I believe.
Yeah, it's hard to say a new thing actually, because it was really comprehensive. Just one more thing, I think, don't invent the wheel. So bring in some international case studies or international, I don't know, expert, and try to find a new pilot or a new, not new, but a small pilot to start with, actually.
I have something to be the ultimate contrarian. I like to go ahead and add something to the mix. We keep thinking, and of course, this is truly the contrary, the American contrarian in me, that we know better than others. And I would actually go ahead and like to go and make this a challenge. What can we learn from the others that we don't know in a way that they would actually go ahead and implement circularity? And especially if we're talking about India, a little bit of information for all of you. I came to circularity through something completely different. It's called frugal innovation, and frugal innovation is the optimizing of the resources that you have, because that's all you have. It's constraint-based innovation. And in fact, for us, India was one of the major leaders with regards to frugal innovation through the idea of Jugaad, which is basically living with what you have. And I wonder if maybe we might be able to perform some sort of reverse engineering that we learn from countries like India, and how we can actually go ahead and do it better, because they might not have some of the baggage that we have. Vojtech, please.
Absolutely. I think this really needs to be said. Like, there are always these pioneers in sustainability, maybe Sweden or Norway, but we're seeing, when you think of the consumption, they are not sustainable at all, right? They consume as much that we would need 4 planets to sustain their needs if the whole world lived like Sweden or Netherlands. So in a sense of India, or I don't know, many other countries out there in the global south, We can learn so much from them in terms of what you said, living with what we have and living decently, right? We don't need 20 pairs of shoes, right? And without that, without this change in our culture mindset here in the West, I think we will not get to carbon neutrality and a real circular economy.
Oh, that leads me to something that I'm sorry, I can't hold myself back. I had a conversation with somebody at the beginning of the year. Seems like a very long time ago since the lockdown. And it was all about the subject of circularity, especially in Central Europe, where, of course, just piggybacking Vojtech and what you said, that's not so easy if people had actually gone ahead and grown up in communism, where basically they were told, no, we're not supposed to have anything, we're all equal, and all of this. The story goes as follows. The woman I was interviewing decided to forego having a car for a year. And she made that decision and went to her kids and said, you know what? I've decided we're not going to drive the car for a year. And you know what the response was from the daughter? Are we so poor that we can't afford a car? Why is this important? Because this is part of the mindset that you know all too well. That was way too long ago for us here in Austria, but I think you're a little bit closer to the subject. How do you deal with this? Because this is something that people are going to say. So you're saying I go without it again? Your thoughts? Please.
May I add? Because I'm maybe not fully agree with Vojtech, because I'm a woman and I like to have sometimes 20 pair of shoes. And circular economy actually allows me to do so with very sustainable way, because I can like lease them or rent them and give back and, have a new one without, putting big footprint on the society. And that's why I strongly believe in the circular economy. We don't have to sacrifice our comfort zone, our like everyday choices. We can do smarter. We can just change a different business model, which allows me to have 20 or wear 20 pairs of shoes, but I don't necessarily have to own it. Yes. And I don't necessarily have to live in my closet, but still I can show off. Yes. So that's, I think, also the advantage of circular economy.
And far be it from me to go ahead and dispute anything you just said, Agnieszka. And besides, I think it's a very important point, because the idea, and I see this quite often, because I'm teaching primarily young people who are carrying around that's baggage coming from my generation, and they feel that, I should never get in the airplane. I should feel really guilty if I ever get into an airplane. Whereas it was my generation, and I'm being very explicit here, it's my generation that was the one who pretty much caused this mess. And so if we keep saying, forego doing anything, then we shouldn't be surprised if people go ahead and say, well, I'm sick and tired of foregoing. Why don't we go ahead and look at nature? Nature produces everything we need. The problem is the way that we actually go ahead and manage it. Going just to support that, what you said, Agnieszka. Bence, you wanted to go ahead and add something to the mix.
Yeah, just one more thought to this topic. So many times, if you speak about circular economy, it's just the first glance. Yes, it's about waste, right? And what to do with the waste. But if we if we go 2 steps back, then okay, how do we plan this? With what kind of technology we do these things, or whether we can repair it? And these are really, really, really important questions, as Agnieszka said. So this sharing economy things, leasing things, and so on. So just don't be a waste. Do not produce waste.
Can you hear me? Okay, because I cannot hear you. So, I would just like to add that we managed to put one map of the city of Bratislava. It's called the circular map of the city, and it includes all these repair shops, rental shops, or I don't know, community gardens, community composting spots around the city, and it's about 500 spots in the city of Bratislava. And when we started this as a small project, that we wanted this map to be like for that all some people will use it, but today it's about 1,000 of inhabitants per week using this map. So we see that this need for renting and not owning and sharing things is really, really growing. Because when we finish this map, then all the other cities were asking, we want the same map to have it, because we want also our inhabitants not to raise the consumption, but we want to share and rent. So this month we are launching now the circle maps of our other 7 big cities in Slovakia. So all the it's called the K8, the big 8 cities of Slovakia will have the circle maps. So we see the great demand on these things and really lowering the consumption.
Yeah, I just thank you so much, Ivana, for saying this and actually for doing the map, because it's also a big inspiration for Prague. And I believe that one of the project teams already got in touch with you, because we are also interested in implementing this. And why? It's because what was said, we need to kind of nudge our citizens. We cannot tell them, like Agnieszka said, you don't need 20 shoes, don't buy that, go back to the trees. No one's gonna do it, right? But what the cities can do is to help citizens to move away from this linear model of, hey, I have a chair, I don't need it anymore, I will just destroy it and bring it to the collection yard, and hopefully it will get recycled. That's not the way forward, right? So what the cities can do, what we're working on in Prague, is to move away from recycling, because we cannot recycle our way out of this crisis, and exactly focus on strategies on prevent waste, repair, reuse, share, remanufacture, and textiles and furniture are key priorities for us. So what we are doing is that we have around 20 collection yards in Prague, which are very linear these days, but around 70,000 tons of waste move through there a year. And we want to turn them into reuse yards. So people will be able to bring stuff undestroyed, and it can be taken by a charity or by local citizens and serve a second, third, or even fourth purpose afterwards. But that's not it, right? We need the map. We need to get it online and allow people to see other things going on than just the city initiatives. Connect to local people that can repair your stuff, right? To the local fairs that are organizing some events where you can trade your stuff or share your stuff. And cities can do this. And reuse center, like in Vienna, like in Slovakia, that's also what we're working on in Prague. And I hope soon we'll have some results also to be able to share with the rest of the world.
And I just want to go ahead and add, Ivana, we have that documented, that a Czech actually looks at Slovak for inspiration, because that's not always the case, historically speaking. Sorry, I had to go ahead and add that one, Vojtech. I hope it wasn't personally. Let me go ahead. No, come on, we have to have some fun. Maybe we're going to add this question from Santiago, where he asked, how do you evaluate the non-material aspects of circular economy strategies? Any thoughts on that? How to convince decision makers without using numbers but ideals?
Oh, that's very hard, because you have to have the numbers, really, and the right numbers. That's the case we have. Don't have a lot of good data so far.
Ben, do you want to? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a question: whether do we really don't have the data? For example, if we speak about carbon dioxide emission, and it's not easy to say, okay, then it's $2, but actually there are numbers for it as well. So for example, if you go to New York and they evaluate the trees and the effect of a tree and how much a tree values, or what's the value of a tree, and for example in Budapest now we say, okay, it costed us, I don't know, planting the tree and watering it, I don't know, 100 euros. But it's not good. What is the ecological value? And there are many studies and great ideas how to evaluate these kind of soft numbers or soft values.
Great. Vojtech, you wanted to say something. I haven't forgot you, Agnieszka.
Okay, I'll be quick so we give also space to Agnieszka. I just wanted to say to Santiago that, yes, it's hard, but we wouldn't be sitting here if it also wasn't for the ideals of the people in charge in our respected cities. That needs to be said, right? Because if we had a political leadership in Prague which was totally not in favor of circular economy and sustainability, then they wouldn't even be interested in a meeting with me a year and a half ago, right? So it is about ideals at the start. And that's the initial spark. And it's also about the voters. People are asking for these solutions these days. And that's what also can win a local election on a city level. It can. And the politicians then in charge of environmental strategies feel responsible to do something about it. But in order to do something, you need to show them some numbers and some reasons. It's not enough to say it's popular, it works, it's good for the climate. You need to tell them it even has a payback period. What about that? And then no one's going to say no.
Great. Thank you, Vojtech. Agnieszka.
I would like to add that it's still a discussion going on how to really measure circularity and what criteria we should use to really show if something is more circular than the other thing. So, of course, first of all, we want to measure to really prove, although we want to measure because to show what is better for environment in the whole life cycle, because in circular economy, nothing is black and white. There is a lot of shadows. And that's why we need to really, what is better, plastic bottle or glass bottle? Because I think the answer is not like 100% on one on another, believe me. It's like so many different aspects between that. That's why we need it. But yes, of course, still a lot of projects going on around Europe under Horizon 2020. What kind of indicators we really should use? Because it's not one answer for that. And GDP, what was the indicators for development, economic development, it's not valid anymore. I think there's a lot of economists now start to think how we could measure the sustainable development, and GDP shouldn't be used as a one and only indicator. Thank you.
Great. Ben, please.
If I may have a minute. So if you don't have this, yeah, okay. So there are two types of people, there is this data-based and I do decision based on data, but many times the politicians also, visionaries. And if you can give them a vision, you will be the first in Hungary or in the sea who does that or that. So it can also work. And I do think in circular economy, we do have a good momentum. So, many times we do this because of the environment, you can say as well.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something earlier, Vince, tied to our stakeholders, those being the politicians, and understanding that the motives of individuals, and that's true of all human beings, are not necessarily what you see on face value. And it might not even be part of maybe what they, even the voting, it might be tied to something completely different. And it might even be as obtuse as how do their kids feel about the subject, and to what degree do the children actually go ahead and influence the mother or the father? It can be on that level. And so getting back to the question as far as soft skills, where you don't always have to use figures, are there other ways to influence individuals? The question was decision making, to actually go ahead and deploy the strategies that, let's be honest, I think that we have a great crew here that know the strategy perhaps a little bit better than the politician. I hope I'm not going out in a line, but I think you know better than they do. So what's the goal, and how do we get to the goal would be the one I would like to go ahead and pose. There's one question that we have that was a great segue, and this is all tied to the whole idea of the SDGs. And how does the SDGs come in line with the whole idea of circular cities? Anybody care to take a stab at it? Are you using the SDGs as metrics in some fashion to measure how you're making progress with the circular city project?
Well, for me, it's a little bit too general. They are very general, vague concept, and circular economy is something concrete. It's really practical implementation of some this idea behind SDGs. And of course, there is like a lot of SDGs, regarding water, actually circular economy, sustainable consumption, production, there is also SDG. So there is like a plenty of that, which could be combined under circular cities. Although it's for me, it's still a little bit vague idea, while circular economy is something practical.
Vojtech.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time, so I'll be super quick. I agree with Agnieszka, but I also want to say it is all interlinked, right? A lot of the things that we're doing are in line with the SDGs. My favorite ones are number 12 and number 17, and the 17 is exactly why we are talking over here, because I think we have a lot to learn from each other, and I hope we'll keep in touch with all the speakers here as well.
I couldn't agree more. Although I do have to quickly interject tied to the SDGs, I participated in a roundtable discussion, roundtable discussion a year ago, asking people whether they even knew what the SDGs were, even if they knew what they were, and most people had never heard of it. And this was not coming a man on the street, but rather people that are a little bit more influential in our society. So I'm not quite sure if maybe this idea of SDGs being general, I agree with you, Agnieszka, but people don't even have a concept of the SDGs. So we have a long ways to go with regards to awareness. All right, I get off my pedestal and give you an opportunity, maybe some closing words. As you mentioned, Vojtech, we're reaching the end. So if there's anything you'd like to go ahead and share, pearls of wisdom coming from the Visegrád Group, please, I leave the stage open to you.
Well, I already told my wish in the beginning that we all really need also just to learn even from each other, but also learn from the situation that we are now in. And I hope it will bring the results of for the better decisions in the future for all of us. So we have to really remember what problems that we managed to solve, and how hard was it, and what mistakes that we made before. So, but I think that as our colleague from Budapest has already mentioned, that circular economy has really good chance really to be implemented worldwide, and it's really good opportunity to do it now. And I think that's it from my side.
Excellent. Vojtech, please.
I wanted to say two things. One, whoever is watching and you know how to help, let us know, let me know. Prague is always looking for people, solutions, companies, and inspiration. So reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn under this name that you see. And the second thing that I wanted to say as a concluding remark would be something that stuck in my mind when Agnieszka was talking about a circular economy and the consumption. I agree with you, Agnieszka, that circular economy allows us to consume better, right, with lower impact. But it will never be zero impact, I'm afraid. We will never be 100% circular, not at least in the next 100 years or so. So I think, and that's what I don't like about a circular economy concept these days, and about the level of the awareness around it, because I think that's exactly what needs to change. We should address also the excess consumption that is driving the climate change and the environmental degradation. Circular economy is so sexy because it taps into that and it offers us less guilty way maybe to consume continuously and even more. But I think we should also limit that in order to really be sure that we're on the safe side of our future.
That's almost a live stream in itself.
For 5 shoes. 5 pair of shoes, I agree then. Okay.
Vince, it looks like we leave you with the closing words as the couple.
I just wanted to say to Vojtech that you already made an impact that matters. I just wish to everybody to be able to change the mindset actually, and to involve more engaged companies and NGOs and people. So we have a good momentum now. I hope we will be able to use it.
All right. Well, then, thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to thank our audience as well. Thanks for holding out the entire hour. What I'd like to do is perhaps highlight some of the things that we have coming up. Our next event will be taking place on Tuesday, the 10th of November, and we'll be looking at solving waste problems through city-scale co-creation, which I think is a great segue from that of what we were talking about. That will take place on Tuesday, the 10th of November at 10 o'clock Vienna time. So hope that you are able to go ahead and perhaps some of you join us. Again, thank you very much for joining us today, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and stay circular.